Welcome to the Conversations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Alison. If you're all about comfort zones and the status quo, this isn't your show. Each episode shares untold stories from disruptive leaders and innovators who challenge norms, drive business transformation, and lead with unapologetic purpose. And don't miss the unword effect, 3 defining words that shape their leadership evolution. What does it truly mean to have power and use it ethically? Today's guest is Shana Francesca, founder and CEO of Concinnate, a cult survivor, scholar, and unapologetic changemaker. Raised in a high-controlled, abusive environment, she spent over a decade dismantling beliefs that curiosity was dangerous and showing her own identity felt unsafe, and turned that trauma into a strategy for breaking free. Through Concinnate, Shana is redefining leadership around curiosity, respect, and accountability. Let's explore what ethical leadership really looks like. Thanks for joining us on another episode of the Conversations podcast. I am Dr. Alison, and I'm so excited to welcome Shana Francesca. She is the founder and CEO of Concinnate. I am grateful to have you on the show, but also, more importantly, it's just been wonderful to get to know you through this process.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree.
Well, thank you. So as I mentioned, I like to kick off each episode with a segment that I call the unword effect. And this is where I ask each of my amazing guests to share 3 words with the prefix of un. And what these words mean to them, how maybe those words have influenced them in some way, or key moments in their professional or personal journey that they've been on, or maybe even how their own leadership has evolved. And you dove into this, and you dove into this in such a beautiful way, because usually, sometimes I will get wonderful guests who will give me the words and just a little bit of an explanation. And you were like, hey, I want you to really understand what these words really mean to me. And I was just really struck by them. And so I would love if you could share with us what your process was in coming up with those words. And then we will definitely have you go into those individually.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I thought about, I think sometimes it's easy for us to kind of take for granted, if we want to say that, like who we are and how we show up in the world, because we're so used to being in our own skin.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
so when I go into interviews, especially like ones like this, where you give me the opportunity to really think about how I want to talk about who I am in a different way, right? I really look forward to those moments. I've been interviewed a lot, right? I've been interviewed a lot. And so I really sat with and I thought, I really want to talk about my experience, not just as me, but as like help people to understand what it is to be a neurodivergent person, help people to understand what it is to come out of a high control environment, both in a high control religion and an abusive household, and really kind of understand, maybe even in part, the process of moving from this high control mentality to discovering and empowering your own humanity, and in so doing empowering so many other aspects of your life that I'm sure we'll go into throughout the conversation. But
yes,
I wanted to kind of give people glimpses of what it was like to be me in different stages and different moments of that process.
And I think that is that's so wonderful for you to say, because, and I know you'll go into this, but you and I have had conversations, and you came from a cult.
Yeah.
And I think the word of that, and then I think how people have seen like documentaries on Netflix or other things that they may that's on TV. And
Yeah.
so they might not think that those people really exist in life, and how they function in life,
Yeah.
and what that really entails for the individual.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about your journey of how, in a way, I wouldn't say completely transition, but how
Yeah.
you are in your business and personal life
Yeah.
today from those experiences. So thank
Yeah.
you for
I,
kind of giving us context around that.
yeah. And I think to like just add on to that before we get into the next moment is
Yeah,
I
please.
think when we're used to seeing stories from the hero's journey from this triumphant ending,
Beautiful. Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that's what television shows us, right? Because we want to see that triumphant ending. But the reality is that that's not real. There isn't some triumphant ending to deconstructing. And I love to put it this way for people. We cannot wade daily in systems built on oppression and think we come out clean. So whether you grew up in a cult or not, there is a daily process of digging into and empowering your humanity and being a part of creating a world where everyone is empowered to be the most, you know, humane, powerful version of themselves.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that is a continuing process. There is no ending to that. And when we are looking for that ending or thinking that the ending has to come, it's usually because we're leaning into hyper individuality rather than into doing that work communally. And so we're going to kind of touch on that and that being a part of what I discovered and had to learn through and actually to empower my healing journey.
Yeah, and I'm so thrilled that you mentioned that, because just like any impactful, have it be abuse or someone in a situation, as you explain, in taking away power, it yes, there's healing, but it doesn't mean that it just completely disappears from who you are as a human being.
The
So
trauma does. The
yeah,
trauma can.
of course,
But
of
but
course,
but the effect, the derailment of your story, that's always going to be part of your journey, right? Like, because
yes.
that is the journey, right? The journey is these derailments. And they don't, it doesn't have to be these painful ones, but in my case, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you for that. So I think that was perfectly said for us to go into your first unword.
Yes.
And what was that?
Unfettered. So unfettered means released from physical or mental bonds, unrestrained. So another unword at the end.
Yeah, I love
Unfettered, and unrestrained. That's not two of my words. It's still only one, but I thought it was interesting that another unword was part of the definition.
Yeah. And how, what was it about Unfettered that really was impactful that you feel in your story? Like
Yeah.
that when you were going through that, it was like this is the word, and sort of putting it into some
Yeah.
context.
Yeah. So around 24, 25, I moved in with my grandfather. He was passing away from cancer. And I was working at this great company, but it was in King of Prussia where he lived. And then when he passed away at 20, when I was 26, he wasn't 26, I was 26. He was 80. He was 80. um, I moved back home temporarily and, and was commuting for a while, but then found this new job. And it was this was 2011. So the economy was still struggling from the
Yes.
2008 crash. Like,
Yep.
people don't, people who were adults at the time remember it took years and years. It was one of, the largest economic depressions we've ever faced as a country. And so 2011, things were still a little bit yucky.
Yeah.
But we're
I
picking up
yes.
a little bit, right? And so I found this job, you're kind of just trying to make decent money to survive, right? I graduated in 2007, 2008, I was looking for a job, but the signs were already there that we were headed towards a massive recession and companies were laying people off already
Yes.
in 2007. And so, by 2011, I'm like, I can't keep making $35,000 a year. I have student loan debt. I have all of these things. Like, this is not a way that I can continue to move forward. So I got this new job, and it was like doing some part of the job was like sales, and kind of gave me this opportunity as the economy was starting to like pick up pace to like get into sales. And I start working for this company, and I worked for a man who wasn't actually that much older than me. He was like 5 or 6 years older. So his father had hired me, but the father was kind of in transition, leaving the company to his like 31-year-old son. And this is somebody who felt that they knew, or they had to know. Like they had to put up this front, like they knew everything there was to know, or the source of knowing was never going to come from me or from any other employee. It was only going to come from other people they considered senior to them, right? And so there was this very strict way that I had to show up in the world in my job.
From this individual?
Yes, from this individual. So this person, like, I was working eight hours a day, and then I was required to go to 2 networking events every week. And then I was required to go to lunches and dinners and take clients out. And so it was encompassing like 60,
Sure.
70 hours a week of my
Yes.
life at minimum,
Yes.
right? And then you're
Yes.
prepping on the weekends, and you're working on bids, and you're doing all of these things. And so I was working a tremendous amount of time, and I wasn't making that much money. And I kept going to my boss and like asking, this isn't sustainable. This doesn't even make any sense to me. Like, this doesn't even feel legal. Like, you can't require me to work more than you're willing to pay me. And also, like, I'm pretty sure like this is illegal in general. Like, you're requiring me to work 8 hours a week and then requiring me to go to these networking events, which adds another 10 hours. And I'm not getting paid overtime. I'm salary, all of these things. And I'm like, you're not actually paying me that much money. So like your expectations are not meeting how you're paying me. And at the time, they were kind of stifling how much I was making, and I was struggling, right? And I had grown up in this environment where you're supposed to do what you're told.
Sure.
Right.
Yeah.
But also I showed up in the world as a neurodivergent person who never, ever did what I was told. Because I always learned the rules and then learned how to break them.
Yeah.
Because the rules didn't, like, there are some rules that I think make sense, right? And then there are others that feel absolutely arbitrary in order to control me. And those are the ones that I'm absolutely going to break, and I'm going to break them first.
Yes.
Because I recognize the slip into control, right? And I recognize how harmful that is, and I came to this place somewhere in my mid to late 30s where I realized like somebody will hire you for exactly who you are, or someone will date you for exactly who you are. And then because of their own insecurity, they will try to change you into who they want you to be in order for you to not reflect back to them all of their insecurities.
Now, was this particular part of your career and journey before or after?
So I was just leaving the cult that I was raised in at this exact same time, right? So I'm glad you asked that, because I'm trying to piece this together for people listening. At the same time, my dad had left my mother 2 years earlier, right? I had moved in with my grandfather, then I moved back home, then I moved back out. I have this new job, and I left the cult I was raised in because I started going salsa dancing. And I was looking for a way to kind of regulate my nervous system through all of these changes. And I just love dancing. It's been something I love my whole life. And I had gone a few times, and as I was kind of thinking about leaving the church that I was raised in, and some people started making some comments like, oh, that's sexual. Like, why are you doing these things to get attention for your body? And I'm like, David danced naked before God, but nobody seems to call that sexual. Like, meanwhile, he did some horrific shit. Like,
yeah.
So like there's all of these things happening at the same time. And I think ultimately I just got to this place where I was like, I'm so tired of people trying to control how I show up and pretending like I'm bad and wrong for being myself. And so there was this moment where I just gave myself permission to be unfettered, to literally not listen and prove them wrong, because I knew they were wrong. And I
Yeah.
didn't care actually. And then it was about proving them wrong. Now it would just be like, I'm just being myself and I don't actually have anything to prove. But then I felt I had so much to prove. But I kind of let myself out of their expectations to a degree, right? Because I think trying to prove someone wrong still has you inside of their expectations.
Yes. Yes.
But
And,
there was this beginning to that, right?
and you probably speaking up for yourself,
Yes.
in
Yeah.
particular in that job that
Yes.
you were just speaking about, was probably also really exhilarating for you
Yeah.
from where your from kind of what your past,
Yeah.
which we'll get into, was
Yeah.
probably telling you to be.
Yeah, because they couldn't hit me, right? They could hurt me financially, and they did. I mean, that same boss looked me in the face and said, "It's only your second year of sales, and even though you're the second highest grossing salesperson and you brought in $1.7 million at a 19.6 GP, that's like $370,000 worth of profit for the company. I'm only going to pay you your base salary plus like $5,000 this year, which made it like $51,000, and I'm going to keep the $20,000 you would be getting if it was not only your second year in sales." And I'm like, what does that have to do with anything?
Yeah. Yeah. I know that makes perfect sense.
Like, what does it have to do with anything? And so like it was these mostly men looking me in the face and telling me that they're exploiting me and thinking that that's okay and acceptable. And I thought to myself, what is it that I'm signaling to these people that makes them think that saying these things so boldly is okay?
Yeah.
And so that's when I let myself off the leash. I was like,
Now, I would probably say that goes into your next unword. So let's talk about what was it about Unleashed for you in
yeah.
your journey, because I think that's a perfect transition for that.
Yeah, exactly. So unleashed is my second word, right? And it means released with full power or intensity to abandon control of, right? And so I wasn't abandoning control of myself. I was forcing others out of control of my life. I was saying, you don't get to control me anymore. Humans are not to be controlled. And if some people like that, great, but that's not my kink. So I'm gonna like let myself, out of this situation. And ultimately I just left the job, right? At first I was unfettered, right? I was staying in the job, I was pushing back, I was trying to push for change, and it didn't work, right? And then I realized you just have to let it go. You
Yeah.
just have to let it go. You can't make a bad situation good, and you know that already. You know
And,
that
and
already. You grew up in it.
and I know that was not easy.
No,
That the way you're
no,
speaking about that, which we'll get into, that was not
no.
easy for you to get to that stage, not only to be unfeathered and to be unleashed. So we'll get more into that as well, because
Yeah.
this is just a small glimpse of a bigger story and journey.
Yes.
uh your third word, which I loved, was unveiled. And the reason why I also
Yeah.
loved unveiled, because it had a special meaning when I rebranded and relaunched my company Unconvention
Yeah.
and started Unconversations,
Yeah.
because for me, a lot of my career and choices that I made in life was also allowing control
Yeah.
from other people. And
Yeah.
so for me, I did feel this was not only an unveiling of me, but also unveiling the type of work that I want to really produce out into the world. So
Right.
I resonated with that one,
Right.
and not saying we have similar frameworks around it, but it
Yeah.
one that really felt really meaningful to me. So I'm looking forward to hearing your unveiled
Yeah.
story.
So for listeners, unveiled means revealed, no longer hidden. And part of growing up in a high control environment is recognizing you are not safe.
Yes. Yes.
You
Yes.
externally, internally, spiritually, physically, emotionally, you are not safe. And so you have to hide you. You have to only put forward the version of you that can survive that environment and will experience the least amount of violence, which means you have to acquiesce parts of yourself to excessive amounts of control. And you have to hide. You have to hide the parts of yourself that you know to be most precious, the parts of yourself to be most vulnerable, the parts of yourself most deeply connected with how you want to show up in the world, because they will be weaponized against you and they will be used to hurt you. And you know, some part of you knows deep down inside that if you're going to survive this and when you survive it, because you have to decide if you're going to survive, because not everybody does.
Sure.
That's the reality. Not everybody does. And this is not a slight against people who don't survive. It's a slight against those who make it so that they can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
But in those environments, if you can find a way, you hide yourself, because you know when you are outside of this environment, you want that part, that most precious parts of yourself, to survive along with you. And so, you know, being in, you know, going from kind of, and you don't know how to be not in a high control environment. It feels familiar. So you keep bopping from high control environment to high control environment. Now they might get less and less controlling. You might find more and more environments where you know they're controlling, but you have found that you could push back in ways that make you feel safer. But it's what's familiar. And also you think that everything's high control. You think everything's some version of that. It must be for the people in your life to feel so comfortable doing that to you.
Well, and I can absolutely see that, because if you're in a controlled, I mean, it's like any type of experiment, right? You have your placebo and your controlled group.
Yes.
And if we go with the controlled group, you know, they're wanting to manipulate a situation. And so when you go into other situations or exposed to other people, your message could be, this is this environment again, and these people are those bad people, or people that make, or the type of people who may make you feel unsafe.
And it's also kind of a way of revealing, right?
Yes.
Of unveiling who they are to themselves. Because once you're out of these super high control environments, now you can act as a mirror for all the people who think they are not seen, who think they're slick and getting away with it, right? And it's not like it was some kind of like vigilante justice, but I was navigating the world going, good God, there's a lot of insecure people who try to hide that with ego. Because I've never met a truly confident person. I've never met a confident person who feels the need to try to control and have power over others.
100%.
Ego is the deranged doppelganger of confidence. There is no confidence in ego. There's not an ounce of confidence found in it, right? And another thing that I want to kind of bring up is there's a doctor out of Stanford who's been doing research on aging, and I forget her name, but she was recently on an episode of Hidden Brain, and she was talking about the fact that they were studying, like, as people get older, why do their friend groups shrink? Why do they travel less? Why all these different things, right?
Yes.
And then they ran an experiment, right? And it's because they expect their lives to end soon. So they're kind of doing, like, they're eating the things that they love over and over again. They're telling the same stories that they want to survive them over and over again, right? Well, they did a study where they took young people who were perfectly healthy, so on and so forth, and they told them to imagine their life was going to come to an end soon. And then they took the older people and they told them, imagine there's a new treatment that in fact extends your life healthy for another 20 years. And what happened to the young people group is they started acting like the old people, and the old people started acting like young people. Now there's an important thing in here. The entire time she was talking, I thought, this is exactly what cults do.
Yes.
Cults get you to constantly think about the end of your life, about death, about the end times, about revelations, about all of these things. And that constant imagining of your death and having to die for your beliefs and being persecuted for your beliefs, this constant imagining of death, pain, and horror, has a purpose, and it's to psychologically control you. And so in that environment, you have who you are is not safe, and also who you are is not revealed to you, because you're constantly imagining the end of your life rather than imagining a world in which you're happy, healthy, and thriving.
Sure.
And so you're
Sure.
not contributing to a world that would could be happy, healthy, and thriving if we were all contributing to that, because you're constantly just imagining it's going to end, and so you don't need to contribute to that. And so there's this real serious moral interruption that happens, right? And so walking out of that and saying, I don't believe this, or I'm going to at least explore if I believe this, because ultimately I didn't stop believing in hell till I was 34. And for those of you who still do, that's entirely your beliefs, but that's not mine anymore. I don't take that on anymore. And
so let me ask you, Shana, in regards to because I would love for us to have my listeners and viewers understand a bit more about how you were involved in a cult,
yeah,
and then what the journey was like and transition for you in getting and I'll just say out in however you want to
yeah,
define that, and how that journey kind of, and we'll, I'm sure, stop at certain
yeah,
points here and there, but how you created Concinnate, and how that name, I just love that name,
yeah,
and how that came about, because you, what you do, and you talk to so many people, they
yeah,
don't even have to be in businesses. You just talk to people in general. But as I said, this isn't a, a therapy podcast. I just had the joy of talking to guests in psychological
yeah,
content, which I think is so fun because I do come from a clinical background. So
yeah,
I just find it also so fascinating. But a lot of these issues that you, and topics that you're speaking about bleed into corporations. So I want to make
yeah,
sure we, yeah, that we
yeah,
save time to kind of talk
yeah,
about that
yeah,
as well. But people feel stuck in some fashion, and that
yeah,
could be a cult, that could be an
yeah,
abusive relationship, that could
yeah,
be feeling that in a job. And I just think this conversation could be so meaningful to a lot of people.
yeah.
So I would love to kind of start, if you don't mind, sort of how this journey began, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah. So, the process of coming out, right, of all of this,
Hmm.
took me 10 years. So we're gonna rewind a long time, right? We kind of started in my mid-20s. We're gonna rewind back to my childhood. My parents got married really young. Both lived in abusive households, just different types. Both, verbally and physically violent, just in different ways, right? One was a very waspy way of like, upper middle class, stay at home mom who really didn't want to be a stay at home mom, felt really resentful that her husband's traveling to do work, so on and so forth, and was stuck at home with these three young kids. And did things like hair walks. So for those of you who don't know, it's like grabbing your child by their hair and dragging them down the hallway and like putting them in a cold shower or something like that. So it wasn't like pervasively violent. It was just like when they did something wrong, right? And
Sure.
that's the environment that my mom grew up in. And then you have my dad, who's working class, grew up in like Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. Um, whose mom was also a stay-at-home mom, one of six kids, very Catholic. In my mom's case, her mom was Protestant, her dad was Catholic, so they didn't really go to like church a lot, but there was still like that Catholic upbringing. But in my dad's case, they were super Catholic, went to mass every week. But his dad was undiagnosed with ASD, so autism spectrum disorder. Yeah.
Sure.
So I think both sets of my grandparents on both sides were neurodivergent,
Hmm.
either having ADHD, autism, or autism spectrum disorder. I look back and I can see all the kind of telltale signs, but I can't really diagnose them, right? Um, but all of my siblings were all neurodivergent. So like genetically,
Yeah.
it's kind of like blaring the signs are.
So this was being passed down from generation to
Yeah,
generation.
exactly.
Mhm.
And so you have this needing to conform to societal expectations, dysregulation, undiagnosed neurodivergence can be really, really harmful, right? Because you don't then understand your dysregulation. You don't understand how to deal with it. You don't understand how to learn how to co-regulate all of these things. So these were very, and so both my parents kind of jumped out of the frying pan into the fire, got married at 21 and 22, had me at 22 and 23. They got pregnant with me a month after they got married. And then, we're in this working class, working paycheck to paycheck, 70 hours a week in the restaurant industry. And my dad never addressed all of the hate towards women and anything feminine and that is passed down through patriarchy and through misogynistic ideology.
And was he, Shana, were your parents at that time in the particular cult
No,
that you were? Okay, so
no,
not okay. So this was
yeah,
just family.
yeah,
This was just family abuse that was sort of
yeah.
trickling
But,
down.
but unfortunately, men and people like my father, who want to be able to carry out violence and control over others, look for environments that will approve of their desire to be in control.
Sure.
And he found that. We went to a bunch of different churches when I was little that were not supportive of, like, to the degree, maybe in some way the man's the head of the household, that sort of ideology, but we're not supportive of like physical violence and domestic abuse and all of those things. And then I started going to the school at 5 that then was also a part of the church that we ended up attending eventually when I was like 8, 9. That really empowered him to do what he wanted, really. And they would say that they felt otherwise, but they were hiding pedophilia and domestic violence and financial abuse and verbal abuse and infidelity, and punishing women for it and not the men. The men would stay in positions of privilege. The women would basically be shunned. There was all this, have to walk around with their head hung high and constantly repentant, head hung low, and like, I know I did this bad thing. You know what I mean? Like constantly having to kind of, do this while the men could just walk around and continue.
And was this church at this time that you're speaking of? Was this the church at the time that we'll say you were being groomed in?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And so this environment was one of spare the rod, spoil the child. I don't know how many people are familiar with Dr. James Dobson. He recently passed away. Very much believed that, against what we know to be true, right? So science directly disproves if you hit your child, even as if you see it as correction, it is perceived as physical violence that causes the same psychological damage as domestic violence, because it is domestic violence. I was beaten on my bare behind. My dad insisted that my clothing had to be removed in order for me to be punished. That's sexual assault. These are all things that were pushed forward and green lit by Dr. James Dobson and the spare the rod, spoil the child ideology, which pushed forward all of these things. And so there's, I was beaten with a paddle. This is not a unique experience for many young evangelical Christian children who grew up in that. Many of us were beaten with our dad's fraternity paddle on our bare bottoms. Like these are 1-inch oak, almost inch oaks. It's like 5/8 oak paddles. Sure. And if you put your hands in the way or cried out or cried or begged or did anything to respond to the pain being inflicted on you or the pain you knew that was coming, you were beaten more. Right. And so this ideology is very damaging.
Without a doubt.
It leads to drug use. It leads to, impulsive behavior. There's lots of studies that you can look up. Anybody who's interested, you can go on Google Scholar and you can look up that research. It's very, very out there and has been for a long time. So, so I grew up in this environment, and this is the environment that my dad was getting to, is like, I want to find the place where who I want to show up in the world as is angry and violent, approves of that. And he found that place, and that's where I grew up, is in that environment from the time I was like 9. I mean, I was in it from the time I was 5, but we were fully in it by the time I was like 9, 10 years old.
And how long was how long were you in the cult?
Till I was 26. So I left
You were
completely when I was 26.
So
Yeah.
you were 26. And so at that point, you were already, I mean, a full-fledged adult.
Yeah.
Were there any moments during that experience that you even thought that you could kind of be who you are today? Was that even a thought at that moment in that time? Or um, you know, we're talking now an adult, and you were working at the job that you spoke about, right, at this time?
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's where I was kind of curious around that because
Yeah.
you were in a cult
Yeah.
working now at this, still involved working for this company that
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
previously spoke to us about.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I think a lot of times people think a cult, they think everyone's living on a compound, that sort of thing. That's not how cults work. They create a prison in your mind, and then you become your own jailer.
Well, explain a little bit more about that,
Yeah.
because we talk sometimes about and especially when I even work with clients, sometimes they're the block that's
Yeah.
getting them to move forward, or their business to move forward.
Yeah.
What was that experience like for you
Because I
in
think
context?
a lot of times high control ideology works really hard to convince you that it's normal. And the very concept of normal is a violent one. I really need us to get on that page together, because who decides what's normal?
Right, exactly.
Who
Exactly.
decides?
Hmm.
Right? And
Exactly.
why are we acquiescing to what someone else decides is normal? Yes, there are things that are harmful, right? I'm not saying that we don't recognize and acknowledge and take accountability for things that are harmful, but who decides what's normal, right? And I get that we all need to belong, right? But
And I would even say, what does belong even truly mean to
right.
you?
What is, because people will
Because
manipulate that, right? And so
right.
one of the things that I do in my work, is to kind of digress for a minute. One of the things I had to do for myself to leave was to start
Yes.
to define things for myself. Defining things for yourself, taking a word, right? Because you have people in the world right now who are saying woke is so bad, woke is so bad. Woke literally means socially responsible, caring about the realities of other people. All that word literally means is caring about your fellow man. And
Correct.
you have people who are weaponizing that and saying that's bad and wrong. Are you okay? Like,
That
clearly we're not okay, right?
that's why I wanted you to speak
Right?
about that. Yeah, that's why I wanted you to
And
speak
something
about that.
inside of you and something inside of me said, this isn't okay. Like, I care about people, and I'm becoming the very angry, nasty human that I see my father to be. I'm becoming him because I am buying into the same ideology that people deserve to be punished if they don't obey us, that people deserve to suffer in this lifetime, that the only reward is in the next time. Do you see the correlation, right? And when you buy into that, you're okay with violence against people in this life. It's expected,
When was your
right?
aha where you were like, I this truly isn't my belief system, these things.
I think for me,
And
that progression started when I was like 15, but it didn't end until I
wow.
was 34.
Okay.
Right. It
Okay.
might even, it probably even started way before then. I can think back to when I was like 11 and 12, and I had this, like, I don't think this God cares about me. I don't think that if this God is all powerful and all knowing and benevolent, I do not see proof that all those three things can exist simultaneously. I don't see that. So if they're all powerful and all knowing, then they knew they were creating a world in which I would suffer, and they didn't have to create it that way, and they chose to anyway. And then they're not coming in their all powerfulness and stopping the pain that is caused to me because they created the world in which they did. Because free will doesn't exist if you have a creator, right? And so like I'm sitting and wrestling with these things at 11 and 12, and I'm asking a lot of
Wow.
questions.
Those
But
are
then I
very
was
big
told,
questions to
right.
ask at
But
11
then
and
I
12.
was told that it's okay. I'm just seeking out God and I'll always come back. I'll always come back. I'll always come back. These thought stopping cliches, right? You're going to come back. You're going to come back. It's very programming. It's very groomy, right?
Yes.
And so you think to yourself, okay, so that becomes that manifestation of like, I'm going to question it and then I'm going to come back. So at like 15, 16, I start like doubling down, right? I'm like, maybe God isn't actually saving me because I'm not holy enough. I started buying into that, right? And I'm like, I'm just going to 100% go in. And then my dad sexually assaulted me, right? And so there's all these things. I'm like, I'm doing everything I can on my end and I'm seeing no meeting anywhere, right? I'm not seeing this figure that I'm supposed to, I'm not seeing that, right? And so all of this questioning really started coming back up for me. And I kind of disengaged. I still pretended I went along with it. I went through the actions, I went through the motions. And I still tried, but I could feel part of me being like, this thesis has already been disproven. In my mind, for me.
Shana,
And then it
that's
like,
amazing to me. If I could just interject, it's amazing to me with, you know, there's a lot of people in this world that has had something traumatic happen to them. And that could be betrayal, it could be sexual abuse, it could be
yeah,
anything, and it can break them. I mean,
yeah,
break
it
them.
did break me. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to ask
yeah,
you. In how so it did, and to where, um, because for me, I went through my own
yeah,
10-year journey, certainly not to this degree, but still very painful for me. And to finally find the strength. And if I probably didn't go through what I went through, I probably wouldn't even be talking to you today or have the strength to do what it is I'm doing. And so I was curious to know for you, with being broken down, and however you're
yeah,
defining that, and then being able to find that strength, because I people have that moment to either this is going to crush them and
yeah,
they're going to wither away,
yeah,
and this will kill them with
yeah,
either alcohol, drugs, or anything you're
yeah,
talking about.
yeah,
And then for you, you found eventually through your process strength to
yeah,
do what you're even doing today and
yeah.
sharing this incredible story.
Yeah. I mean, I spent 15 years with an eating disorder, starting from the age of 15 all the way up till I was 30. I had a very significant issue with food.
Mhm.
Started out by using Epicac syrup to get my, for those of you who are not familiar, Epicac was this syrup they used to sell at the local grocery store in case your kid swallowed some kind of poison. Now you just take them to the hospital because they put like charcoal in your stomach. But back then you wanted it to come back up as quickly as possible. So everybody had these bottles of Epicac and you would put this little bit in water and drink it and you would violently vomit within 5-10 minutes. And I would pretend it was like heat exhaustion, or I would do it in the shower or whatever. And then I started like sticking my fingers down my throat and doing all of these like harmful things, right? Binge eating or just not eating. A lot of people in my life, they would like read the calories on things. I didn't have to read calories on anything. I just didn't eat. I
Yeah.
would I would
Yeah.
eat, maybe a quarter cup or a half a cup of chicken breast and a cup of rice with some butter and salt, at the end of the day so that I didn't go hungry, go to bed in an empty stomach. I might drink a cup of milk in the morning. And for those of you who haven't been through an eating disorder or know someone with one, eventually your body goes into ketosis. And it's pretty constant and your breath smells like an old folks home.
Mm.
It's kind of the same process, I think,
Mhm.
medically, scientifically. Um, you get the old people smell. And my sister started picking up on it. She's like, why do you smell like that? Why does your breath
Mm.
smell like that? Did you eat today? And so there was people in my life who were recognizing it, but I'm 6'1". Those of you who are watching, you can't tell how tall I am, but I'm 6'1", and I got down to 157 pounds and thought, oh, at a size 4, I'm still fat. I need to get a little bit smaller.
Yeah. Yeah.
I needed to lose
Mhm.
10 more pounds. I needed to lose 5 more pounds at least, right? And I was a bag of bones. I have a very strong musculoskeletal structure. I'm Irish, Nordic, Swedish. I have a very strong bone structure and I looked like a bag of bones and I was.
Mm.
And so there was this breaking. I broke. I
Hmm.
broke. And for 3 years, my mom didn't know. I didn't tell anyone. Then I told her when I was 18, one night when my dad tried to take my mom's life. But ultimately, she had sought out a lawyer, and they're like, you can't prove any of this, and the court's going to side with him, and they're going to make you pay alimony because you're the breadwinner. My mom was the breadwinner,
Mm.
and ultimately, he's going to get 50% custody, and she didn't know what to do about that. She didn't know how to fight it, and so she just tried to bide her time so that the younger siblings were at least older, before there was any separation. And then ultimately, my dad left her, did us kind of a favor. And so there was these moments, these big things happening, right? That once my dad's influence was kind of waned, like wasn't ever present in the house.
Yes.
And then I went to live with my grandfather, right? And my grandfather didn't believe the same way we did. My grandfather was a progressive Catholic. He's somebody who voted for both Republicans and Democrats. Like, he was never ideologically, married to any particular person, any particular thing. He didn't believe in worshiping any human, holding them in too high
Yes.
of regard. He had a lot of sensibility. I mean, he'd grown up, through the Great Depression, had lived in that world, and so he understood that, like, no one's God, no one on earth is worth worshiping, and so he really started challenging, because back then, when I was in my mid-20s, that's when the Tea Party started building up, right? So I'm trying to help people to understand all the things that are ideologically happening at the same time. And if you haven't watched Shiny Happy People's second season, Teen Mania, I grew up in that. That was the culture of my youth group. I went to Acquire the Fire rallies. There was this programming of you're militant, you're the army of God, all of these things. And that sounds really benign, but like, they're literally training you. We were taught to, like, tithe off what we wanted to make, and so on and so forth. So we're like not making ends meet, or as young people, and we're tithing off what we want to make. Meanwhile, structural oppression is not being discussed. The people who are sitting in privilege telling us to do these things are not
Yes.
discussing all of these things. Like, all of these things are kind of coalescing, right? And in reality exist, but I'm feeling the impact of them all at the same time. So I'm really kind of, it's whiplash, right?
Yeah, for
When I'm like,
sure.
maybe I'm just not holy enough. And
Yeah.
another minute, I'm like, fuck this, right? Pardon my language, but like, fuck this,
No,
right?
no.
And
This is the podcast. So
right.
no, please don't.
And so I think when people think about people leaving an ideology, they think, okay, they see the light, now they're out. That's not how psychological control works. You are taught to police yourself. You are taught to put yourself in a prison that exists inside of your own body and inside of your own mind. And then you're also taught to police each other. So at first, you're kind of really policing each other. Then you're policing yourself, because you don't want other people to police you. You don't want other people to be able to, like, tattle on you or get you in trouble or whatever it is. So you start policing yourself. And that's where, when we were talking about, my unwords, where you start hiding yourself away, because
Yes.
who you really are is not acceptable. Even though you're told
Yes.
you're created by God, who God created isn't acceptable. You are a wretched human. You only are good because God created you, and only good because God saved you. All of these really psychologically damaging ideas. And so, you're fighting with this internal dialogue of, I'm just not good enough, I'm not holy enough. And, like, by the way, the spiritual world is very much the same. The whole, manifestation, so on and so forth. Manifestation is just name it and claim it in the evangelical world. It's the same thing. There's
You
no.
know, Shana, I feel like it's very, what you just described is, how you're feeling, and what you're trying to figure out, and how you are in this
Yeah,
religious
yeah,
cult,
forth. Yeah.
and you're hearing something here about yourself, but you're like, no, that doesn't really kind of make sense. That is so very similar. Not what you went through,
Yeah.
please,
Well,
but
I never
similar.
think that people are trying to
Yeah.
compare. There's pain is
Yeah.
pain. We don't have
Yeah.
to rank it.
Yeah, exactly. But similar in what and how we just as human beings present ourselves into the world, have that be personally, or how we are in the
Yeah.
corporate environment.
Yeah.
And the masks that we tend to wear
Yeah.
when when we're all just trying to be ourselves.
WeWork
And
was a cult. WeWork was a cult,
yeah,
right?
I was just about to say the system itself has very similar ideologies.
Same. And that's the thing I need people to understand. It all comes from
Yes,
the same place. They're
yes,
not separate.
yes.
They're
No,
not separate. They are exactly connected. They're exactly the same. They come from exactly the same root. They're just branches off of the same flipping tree. Literally,
exactly.
they're the
Yeah,
same, right?
yeah,
And so when you're in that moment of trying to figure out, like, okay, I know that there's going to be pain and suffering leaving, but I'm suffering so much staying. And
yeah,
there's a point in which the suffering is overwhelming and you realize something inside of you tells you, I'm not going to make it if I don't leave.
yeah,
Like there's a critical point here where either I am going to literally snuff out all that makes me me, that is good and vulnerable and cares about the world around me. I'm going to snuff out my humanity in order to stay inside of this ideology and to quote unquote belong. Or I'm going to recognize, like Dr. Maya Angelou said, that Maya belongs to Maya, Shana belongs to Shana.
yes,
I'm going to realize that I belong to me, and I'm going to have the confidence to recognize that I'm just going to leave because I'm going to suffer either way. And
yeah,
and then you have to rebuild your whole life. And it's a hard decision to make. I get it, right? But it took me, you know, it took me from when I left at 26 till I was 34 to ultimately completely, because then I went looking for non-denominational churches. And then I started working for, organizations that, kind of felt like the non-denominational church on the corporate side to me, right? Like they put out, okay, we're big on, human-centered design, and we're big on, caring for people and making sure that so and so, and they're saying all these things, but they didn't mean them because they weren't lived out, right? Because it wasn't an inclusive environment, right? It wasn't, these spaces where actual humans are valued. You've got to kind of keep up with and put yourself forward as a very specific kind of person. Or you're not valued, and certain persons are allowed to kind of bulldoze over you because they're seen as more valuable by society, so on and so forth. And I'm seeing this in both the corporate world and in the non-denominational churches, right? And then I realized, like, wait, they're actually the things I just left. They're the same. It's the same. It's just a different font.
and Shanna, as you're talking about that too, I think of people that are pinnacle parts of their, let's say they're working. I interviewed a fantastic woman on the podcast, and she made it to that corner office.
Yeah.
She
Me too.
finally made it up there. Yeah, she made it up there. It was so great. And she was the breadwinner
Yeah.
of the family. And so I think you're bringing up an excellent point. We all are presented at some point where we
Yeah.
have this decision to make and where we're going to go, no matter how
Yeah.
hard or
Yeah.
whatever. And even in corporations, there's many of them
Yeah.
that are pretty much, well, good luck to you because you're never going to have it as wonderful as you had it
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
Have that be truth or not truth,
Right.
that
Yeah.
could be the
Right.
messaging,
Yeah.
if you will.
But I think when you're leaving those environments, you do it as an individual. But to heal from existing inside of those environments, we have to do it as a community.
Yeah.
And that's where my work comes in, right? So to transition to my work and why I created my company is because I realized that I wanted to create the kind of company that I wanted to work at. And I wanted to create the kind of environment that empowers people, not controls them. I wanted to create the kind of environment, and I had been doing so much research, right? Because I left at 26 and I'm like, I don't know what good leadership is. I don't know how to be in a relationship with people. I know what I don't want. And I think
Yeah.
for so
Yes.
many of us, we know what we don't want. We know what has
Correct.
caused us pain, but we have
Yes.
never been taught. We've never been taught to imagine the world that we want to exist and to imagine it as a collective, right? To imagine it from a community,
100%.
not an
100%.
individual place. So the problem when we imagine it just for ourselves is that we'll then create the very thing we said we were trying to leave. I don't know if you read, what was the recent book that came out? Oh gosh, about Meta. Do I have it around here somewhere? God, what was her name? So she worked for Meta, and it was, oh,
Oh, I have her name on the tip of my tongue. Yes, 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 yes.
she's
Yeah,
an
yeah.
Australian woman, New Zealand, Kiwi. Hold on, I'll look it up. Right. So she was talking about the fact that, you know, she's like inside of these environments, right? And, you know, people leaving those environments is really hard, right? And you think you could just like stay and you can make the change and you can make the change and you can make the change. The
Yes.
book is Careless People, and you can make all these changes,
Yes.
right? And leaving requires you to like recognize, right, that like it's not about us. We can't just
Right.
imagine it for ourselves. We have to imagine it collectively, because like the whole thing, like people like to pretend that Meta was like created back when it was Facebook, you know, to kind of create social connection. It wasn't. It was a hot or not app, right? Like
Yeah,
it was a
correct.
platform that rated and ranked human beings, right? And then maybe for a while they like tried to kind of, but we're going to create the kind of environment we say we don't want. Like the conversation around Sheryl Sandberg in that book was not astonishing to me. A little like, woo, right? But not astonishing to me, right? Because we can say all the right things and not be living it. If we don't know how to be in community with one another, if we don't actually know what relationship is, if we don't know what leadership is, if we've never challenged the models we've been given, we will never create the kind of world we wish we were living in.
Well, you make the perfect point, because with Facebook, when you talk about community, it was
Yeah.
likes, loves, all these things. And then
Very
we have all these other branches off. And, you know, if you have 500,000 to a billion, you
yeah.
know, viewers or subscribers,
Right.
then that
Yeah.
means you're bringing out fabulous content.
Right. But
When
that's
there's
not what that
people,
means.
right. And so that's what that means, is because
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
content I need to pay attention to. It
Right.
must be, you know, amazing. And so you're right. We bought in, maybe not knowingly in our minds, but we have bought into these structures of
We've
Instagram,
been
and they all
groomed
have
into
we've been groomed for those
We've
things.
been groomed into them. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Did they
definitely.
didn't A lot of people like to say they think that social media destroyed our social connection, and that's not how business works. In
Yeah,
business, you create a product that fills a hole that already exists. You don't create the hole.
correct.
Social media slotted itself right into social disconnection that already existed, and then it made it
Correct.
worse. I'm not saying
Correct.
it didn't make it worse. I'm not saying it's not making it worse, but it slotted itself into something that already existed. And that was an ideological divide. That was people believing that other people deserve to suffer because you disagree with them.
Yeah, I agree. I want to make sure, due to our time,
Yeah.
and you have a little bit more time to spend with me.
Sure. Yeah. Yep.
Okay, perfect. Uh, so first, I think this would be a great transition. One, how did you come up with the name of your company?
Oh, yeah. That's a fun story. A short
Yeah,
one. But a fun story.
I would
Yeah.
love that. And then
Yeah.
I want to really focus on two with you, so people really understand. One, you speak all over, but because what you actually do within your company and what you speak
Yeah.
upon are, you know, they obviously go together. But
Yeah.
let's first start how you came up with the name of your company, and then
Yeah.
just the amazing work that you do out
Yeah.
there in the world.
So I'm looking at my phone for a second for anybody who's watching, because I wanted to bring up the definition, and I should have it memorized by now, but I don't,
It's
because
fine.
we have phones that are right there in our hands.
As
Um,
I'll say again, welcome to the Unconversations
right.
podcast.
So Concinnate is the name of my business, and it took me almost 2 years to come up with that
Yeah,
name.
I bet.
And a friend of mine, I'm a complete nerd, right? So like reading the dictionary as a kid was like a regular fun thing. I would like write down words. This is before like we had the internet like we do now, and so on and so forth. I kept notebooks on me all the time, and I would write down words that I didn't understand, and I'd go and look for the dictionary that had the definition and write down the definitions. Like I've always been kind of a word nerd. So a friend of mine, you know, we'll text each other sometimes, like when we come across a word that we think is funny or interesting, and she sent me this word, Concinnate. And I was like, oh, interesting. And it has to do with harmony in music, right? In kind of a musical compilation, if I remember correctly. And I was like, I love the sound of that. I like the rhythm of it. I love that, but that doesn't really apply to my business. And I think that could be confusing, right? Even though people have probably never heard the word, I don't want it to be confusing. Like, what does this mean? Right. Because I, from the beginning, I meant for this to be global, right? I meant for what I do and what I speak about to influence people around
Oh,
the world. Right.
100%.
And so I was like, okay. And so then I kind of sat with it for a while. I played with it for a few weeks. I'm like looking around. And then I start like, okay, what are like related words to Concinnate? And I came across Concinnate. And consonate means to arrange or blend together skillfully as parts or elements, put together in a harmonious, precisely appropriate, or elegant manner. And I thought, well, isn't that what we're trying to create? Isn't that what I want to create? A world that is built on that, on harmony for all people, for all life,
Yes.
right? That
Yes.
recognizes that we as humans are nature, that we are meant to coexist with and in ecosystems with nature. That when we try to keep nature out, what are we going to do? Lock ourselves out? Like we keep trying to pretend like nature's out there and we're in here, but we are nature.
Yes,
And,
totally.
and study after study shows us that we are meant to be in nature. We are meant to look at it, to be around it, to be surrounded by it, right? To take in those things. It brings us peace. It calms our nervous systems, like all of those things, to remember that all life exists because all life exists,
Yes.
right? And it's that perpetuation of life together in community, right? In ecosystems. And then that got me thinking about what relationships are supposed to be. They're supposed to be ecosystems. Community is an ecosystem. It's a type of ecosystem amongst humans when it's actual community, not
Yes.
the hijacking of that. Right?
Correct.
Somebody can call it a community, but that doesn't mean it's a community, right?
Absolutely.
And so having definitions for these things was really important for me, right? So pulling forward, which is why like I didn't want to name my company something that the definition didn't fit with, right?
Yes.
Right. So always going back and anchoring into the definition, because people who want to control you will always control the definition of something, but they can't control you if you define it. If you have a
Beautifully said.
solid
Yes.
anchored definition, they cannot
Yes.
control you with that word or that language, right?
Correct.
But they'll also dissuade you from defining it for yourself. So the one thing you can do to start taking your power back is to start knowing yourself and defining things for yourself. And so then it got me studying. I mean, since I was 26, I've been like reading books on. I remember I think the first book I read was like outside of the cult was Amy Cuddy's. Is it Presence? I think the name of it. Do you remember that book? It's got like a
I
wood.
remember. Yeah. Yeah, I remember that book. I don't remember the title of it, but I
Yeah, I
remember
think it
that
was
book.
Presence.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Yeah. And I just remember her like talking about all the research she did and everything. And so then I started diving into research more, like, accessing. I mean, it was harder back then because like, you kind of like to get access to like LexisNexis, you kind of had to know somebody, so on and so forth. So I'm just like looking at, we didn't have Google Scholar back then.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to access it through reading books from that researchers had written, right, and are bringing forward that research in, and so on and so forth, and so it was kind of happening slowly, right, and then it happened all at once, that I have more access to these things, so on and so forth, and then in 2019, 20, I think end of 2020 is when I created Concinnate, right, and I had done now at that point, 8-9 years worth of research on leadership and relationship.
Yes.
And people had, really I'm just taking in other people's research and distilling that, right? I'm not actually, creating any studies, right? But I'm taking in all of this research and realized that the through line, right, in ethical relationship, in leadership and all of those things, that leadership at its most powerful is an ethical relationship with those we lead, whether it be directly through one-on-one or through culture. And that relationship, we need to define it because far too many people don't have a definition.
Absolutely agree with you on that because we have so many assessments out there and it'll put us in a box on kind of the type of leader we are and all of that, but again it's still defining us in a box going, yep, that's
But
who
it's
you
also then all about the leader.
Right.
Why
And
are
so,
we? Why are we doing that? I
right.
literally hate
It's
all of
still
those
a,
assessments.
it's
I
right.
hate them.
It's still putting
Yeah.
this hierarchy
Yes.
when, yes, there is a hierarchy, but you could still take that hierarchy and still make it into a community space.
Yeah, exactly. And so like the thing is that, I think when we're talking about what it is to be a leader, we should not be spending all this time thinking about like how we're going to lead other people when we haven't even talked to the people we're leading.
Right. Right.
How do you need me to show up as a leader? If I'm supposed to lead you, I actually
Correct.
need to know who you are and care about you. Like,
Correct.
but that doesn't fit the current structure in our
It
world.
does
It's that it's
not.
deeply
It does not.
hierarchical, and we're seeing the result. The end game of that is nothing good, right? We're seeing that ideology collapse in on itself in real time, right? And so if we want to actually build a thriving world, we're going to have to actually define relationship. And that's where, curiosity, respect, and accountability kind of kept showing up, not in that language, right? I kept thinking like people are kind of defining it in different ways in the research and calling it different things. I was like, ultimately it's curiosity, respect, and accountability.
Yeah. And
Right?
how, because um, tell us a bit about what your company does.
Yeah.
Um, and then I'll have my follow-up question sort of
Yeah.
around that, so the listeners and viewers get sort of an idea of what your company offers.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do workshops, consulting, and I do a lot of public speaking, right? So a lot of people's first introduction to me is typically through me speaking at a conference. Most of them are like private, held by some particular organization, but some of them are public. Um, and then being able, to be like, oh wow, okay, and then they might hire me to come in and do workshops inside their organization, and then also do some consulting and or coaching. I don't call myself a coach. It's not the mainstay of my work. I don't think that most people you know, need me to hold their hand long term. I need them to empower themselves, right? I need their relationship with themselves to be something they're dedicated to, and their relationship to, right? It doesn't mean I'm not there to support you, right? That's where the consulting comes in. Okay, we can check in regularly, right? But it's
And
not
what
like a
does that,
weekly thing.
yeah, and what would that mean specifically? Like,
Yeah.
so would you work with, let's just say a CEO or a founder of a company, and what would be the pain point or something
Yeah.
that they're wanting to focus on where your
Yeah.
expertise would come into play?
In a lot of ways, right? So is innovation and profitability stagnated? They're calling me. Is their culture suffering? They're calling me. Is there high turnover rates? They're calling me, right? Are
Hmm.
they wanting to better um, lean into an understanding of what diversity actually empowers? Because if your organization is not coming from a diverse group of people, right? If you're not embracing and empowering a diverse group of people inside of your organization, you are losing money, you are stagnated, and you know it already.
Yeah,
And
so
can't even put real numbers behind that. So organizations, right, and lots of other banks and financial institutions have put real hard numbers behind what you lose when you divest from relationship with your people, from a healthy culture, and from diversity, right? And so, I'm also, as a neurodivergent person, somebody they're coming to have this conversation around neurodiversity through an intersectional lens. So when organizations are suffering, right, they're coming to me for those soft skills. If you want someone to do a bunch of assessments and you want people to give you a play by play of what to do, I'm not your girl.
mhm.
Because that is very prescriptive, and we are not prescriptions. We are people.
And I will tell you, when I started my business, ALS Group, we focused on, this was over 30 years ago
Yeah.
before I rebranded, uh, with strategic planning,
Yeah.
mergers and acquisitions, a lot
Yeah.
of process improvement,
Yeah.
very sort of tactical things that you were
Yes.
talking about, where you're
Yeah.
like, I'm not your girl.
Yeah.
And that was sort of a way that I was trained as my PhD.
Yeah,
Through going through
absolutely.
my
We are.
PhD.
Yeah. And I started there too. I was like, let's do assessments. And I was like, this is not working.
But it wasn't for me. And
No.
so there was finally a point where, I'm sitting there going, I can already tell you what's going to take care of this, which would be
Yeah.
very similar, I think, today with how you approach your business and how I reapproach my business today now too.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there are things that I use that could help me get a clearer picture, but
Yeah.
most of what I know, and if businesses really want to change, it really starts with us as human beings, which is part of the reason why I wanted to start this podcast and
Yeah.
talk to unconventionally excellent leaders
Yeah.
who are doing the type of work that you're doing. And it is really uh unfettered, in a way, to use your word, to go, hey, you know what, I can tell you exactly what
Yeah.
needs to happen. And it starts with us as human beings and changing our minds on how we want to approach work,
Yeah.
how we want to approach the people who
Yeah.
work within organizations.
Yeah. It's essentially
um
the truth and reconciliation model. Right?
yeah.
It's that truth and reconciliation model. Right? It's for each one of us individually, for inside of an organization, inside of community. That's really what it is okay. We need to have that space, right? We need to create that truth and reconciliation, but we have to start by understanding relationship to begin with, because we can't even enter into that process until we actually understand how to be in relationship with one another, because none of the processes will be successful until we actually know how to be in relationship. And I think that's the thing. It's not that the hard skills and the hard things are not important at
Of
all,
course.
right? Because I'm not an absolutist. I think that an interweaving of things is generally helpful. But if you're starting from the, you know, kind of performative place of let's just fill out these questionnaires, so on and so forth, and that's going to solve the problem, it's not, and it's not. But it's
No.
performative. You're doing it so that it looks like you care, and your people know that, and they're going to keep leaving. Right? So
Yes.
either you
Yes.
want to be profitable and you want to keep very, turnover is expensive. It is one of the largest expensive that organizations face, right? And so like you just want incredible talent walking out the door, right? And a lot of these organizations, in this moment, they're only looking profitable because of stock buybacks and because of raising prices, and it's
Right.
not sustainable. And they
And
know it.
yeah, they know it. And that's what I'm saying.
And they're
You know,
still calling me. People are like, well, you're saying this out loud. Yes, I am, because Fortune 500 and Fortune 100 companies
yes.
are knocking on my door too, right? Like they
Yeah.
know what I'm saying is true, whether they can out loud acknowledge it or not, right? They know that there is a massive struggle inside of their organizations and what they're doing is not working. And you can't keep paying people not livable wages, having massive turnover, no innovation, and your only profitability coming from a false prop up, and think your organization is going to make it long term. It's not, and they know it. So they have to change something, which is why they come knocking on my door.
Yeah, and that is something I have been talking about, turnover, in my early career. And I will tell you, there were lots of organizations that were looking at me going, this is going to be expensive to fix it. And it's not very expensive to fix it. It's expensive to not fix it.
Yeah.
And I would sit there and show. So for me, and having conversations with people like you in 2025, we are still talking about this issue on how to effectively treat people and pay people. And in long term, they are going to be committed to your organization.
Exactly. Right.
I mean, I have been saying this for and profitable. And that's the thing. You're focused about your bottom line. You're if you focus so much on your innovation and with people, you're gonna get what it is at the bottom line that you're hoping to get.
Exactly. And you're going to be competitive long term. You're going to have dedicated clients. You're going to have clients who never want to leave you. Because and that's the thing. Like I knew what I'm talking about was so powerful and was really connecting with people, because it takes you a minute to figure out, like, have I really touched on something that is really actually going to, like, people actually connect with and actually care about changing? Because like you can care about it changing, but if other people don't, you're not going to have a business,
right?
And so I'm like, is this right? And I was on a podcast like probably 3 years ago, and a guy emailed me, and I was like, oh, gosh, okay. Because like the title was like you on whatever podcast. And I was thinking, gosh, I'm probably going to get ripped to shreds. And this man said, you changed my entire perception of myself and the world. And I'm exceptionally grateful. And I was like, wow, a man emailed me and said that.
Yeah.
Shoot, I'm on to something.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
You
For
know,
sure.
Because men are absolutely taught not to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes.
And so, that's when I knew, because I'm like, the oppression, that exists inside of this hierarchical, hyper individualized world, it affects us all, right? Some people still benefit in that world, but we all are losing something. We're all being caused harm, right? A man can't do this, that, and the other because it's quote unquote feminine. What in the hell are you talking about?
Right.
They're just a friggin' human. Who cares if they're wearing lipstick and eyeliner? Who cares? Right? Like, why do you care? And it's because you want to be doing the same thing.
Right.
I'm thoroughly convinced that the people who hate, how other humans, it's because they're jealous. It's because they want to be like that person, or because they know they are like that person. They're just suppressing it. Right.
Yes.
And so I think when we are, hoping that someone else fails, and hoping that someone else is harmed, and hoping that someone else doesn't exist, maybe we just need to be a little bit more introspective and ask more questions and learn more things and give ourselves and everybody else a lot more grace. And that's the whole point of the work, right? Is, can I get people to really understand what curiosity, respect, and accountability are? Because curiosity is not confirmation bias. Respect is not obedience, and accountability is not punishment.
Yes. 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 And I hope you and I can talk after this podcast at some point, because I can see you and I doing something together around this space. We're very similar in how we consult and how we approach it in relationships. And that's part of what I felt was missing in my business, was not being able to work with the human side of businesses, the human people of it. Yeah. The human part. And
the whole thing. It's the whole thing. The humans are the whole thing.
And that's what part of rebranding my business was all about, embracing differences.
Yeah.
And being able to do this podcast, to be able to highlight that individuals like you and myself, with the type of work that we're doing, to allow people to know this is okay. You're going to be okay.
And I think sometimes, I think some people are probably like, well, if you do the same thing, why are you interviewing her? Like, people might ask that. And the thing is that we might do similar things, but we're not actually doing the same thing, because we're two very different people who have very different lived experiences.
Exactly.
And we need as many people doing this work as we possibly can, because that's how the world changes for the better. That's how people actually gain access to livable wages and thriving lives. That's, and the way that Alison is going to say it and the way that I'm going to say it are very different, right? And it's going to resonate with different people. We're going to come at it. Dr. Allison's coming at it from a clinical perspective. I'm coming at it from a lived experience perspective, and both are valuable, right? And so I think, we need more people. That's why we are excited to meet each other and talk. We need more people doing this from the kind of place that we're talking about, not less, because the same leadership nonsense has been cycled through every year after year, right? And it's not working. It never has worked. But what I do see is a transformation inside of organizations that do embrace my work. And I'm sure that Dr. Alison sees the same thing, right? People who are embracing your work. You see this transformation. You see the light bulb go on literally inside of organizations. And there be this beautiful shift, right, of the way that people choose. And it's continuous work. Just like coming out of a cult took me 10 years or 8 years, right? Changing the dynamics of an organization takes years. It doesn't happen overnight, right? People don't just hire me to speak on the stage one time and then whoop, it's magically fixed.
Right.
No magical thinking here. It's work.
Of course.
Right?
Of course.
And so, maybe an organization hires me for a couple of years, or Dr. Alison for a couple of years, and then the other one of us, and then somebody else, and so on and so forth. And we're all kind of building on each other's work and taking that organization to the next place, so on and so forth, right? So I
And
think,
I think that's so great, Shanna, that you're saying that, because the point I wanted to drive home along with you is I've had people say to me, "Why are you having them on your podcast? You know, don't they
right.
seem to be very close to work that you're doing and all this?" And I was like, "Well, yes, part of this podcast is to, yes, promote me, the type of work that I do,
Yeah.
but it's also, I don't look at the people that I have on as competition or not
No,
competition. I
no.
look at people because I think what they're doing, and the more that I've gotten to know you on, even just on this podcast, I think there's a lot of synergies that we can do collaboratively that could even possibly be even stronger in sending
Yes.
this
Together.
message out.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I absolutely agree. And I think companies, if we stop, yes, you know, I've had people go, "Oh, well, you know, with the podcast, also look at your competitors." Well, I don't want to look at my competitors. I want to look to see who people are doing great in the space that I
Yeah,
want to promote this
yeah,
podcast or my
yeah,
business in. What are
yeah,
they doing that's really passionate
yeah,
and along the lines of, oh, maybe I will see something different. Like,
yeah.
I don't want to play in that space. So that's,
Right.
I found that person
Yes.
because but it's this, you're right. It's this competitor, like, how can I be better and more
Yes.
effective than them? And
Yeah.
for me, that's not how I approach and never have
Yeah.
approached business at
No,
all.
me neither. My when I first started out, my attorney who wrote my first contract was like, "Well, what are you going to do when you're in a competitive situation?" And I'm like, "Well, this person's cheaper than you." And I'm like, "Then they can go with the cheaper person." Because
Correct.
if you are sitting here and wanting me to lower my prices and lower what I know I'm worth and what I know you can afford to pay, that doesn't mean I don't work off a sliding scale with small organizations. I do,
Of course.
right?
Of course.
But if I know that an organization has the budget to pay me, I'm definitely going to ask them for what I deserve to make, right? No matter
Correct.
what, and whatever they can afford, right? And and uh and we're going to understand that, like, this is valuable work. We're going to honor it. We're going to value it, right? Um, but like, I think it's ridiculous to just pretend that it boils down to competition, because like he's like, what are you going to do in that situation? And I'm like, well, the only competition I have is who I was 10 seconds ago, 10 minutes ago, 10 days ago, or 10 years ago,
Right.
because there is no other me in this world.
Yeah.
There's not one single other me. And I've become so powerful inside of myself, just sitting with who I know myself to be and the perspective that I bring. Because I remember the first time somebody called me a leadership expert, and I was like, oh God, we're calling me that now. Okay. I don't know if I like that.
Yeah.
Which is why I call myself a scholar, because a scholar can exist academically or non-academically. And a
Yes.
scholar is somebody who's constantly, learning and researching and so on and so forth, a student, right, of the world. Um, and I was like, yeah, I think I want to be a scholar. But they're like, what makes you a leadership expert? I'm like, I didn't even call myself that. You called me that. And now I got to
No.
decide, right? And I just popped out, like, I just said, I'm like, well, I was raised in a cult and I was raised in a high control environment. And I know exactly what happens when leadership is allowed to run rampant with its own ideology from a harmful place. Right. And he was like, great answer. I'm like, good. I'm glad you liked it, because it's the
Yeah.
only one I had.
Well, well, Shanna, we are getting close to time, and I am so grateful for the amount of time that you for being on this podcast. I did want to see if you just a little bit more, because I love to ask my guests. One, if there's anything that you felt that you have left out, and I want to give you just a few moments to talk about that. And two, just to have a little fun, if there's a question that you would like to ask me.
Oh, okay. All right. First, I would like to say, I highly recommend Dr. Ayanna Elizabeth Johnson. She is a marine biologist who wrote the book, What If We Can Get It Right? Or What If We Get It Right? And also, there's an accompanying podcast. And I think if you're looking to understand how to empower change in this world, and she talks about it from she interviews everyone from astrophysicists to farmers to community activists to business owners, so on and so forth, that are doing incredible things, that are profitable, that are stopping and reversing climate change and building community along the way, because you have to build the community first to be able to put forward any change. If you're looking for hope, if you're looking for, what's coming next in this world, I think it's one of the most important books that we could read right now. I highly, highly recommend it. I am actually in the middle of writing my book. The title is How I Became Human.
Oh,
I'm
beautiful.
hoping to have that published next year. I'm going to kind of send it out the end of this year to see if anybody wants to pick it up. If not, I'm self-publishing. So one way or the other, it's going to be probably out in the spring of 2026.
Please let me know that. I want a signed copy of your book.
Oh,
please.
absolutely.
So,
yes.
Yes, please.
Yeah. So the goal is to have it out by May next year.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And, I think, a question for you might be, what is an unword that maybe has stuck out for you recently? Maybe that's like too much though.
No. I would say for me, if I could say this, so one of my words was unapologetic when I first went through this exercise myself, because growing up, I was always apologizing and hiding things about me, and nothing to do with me being LGBT or nothing around those natures, just the type of person that I felt that my parents wanted me to be. And so I was constantly striving to do that. And finally realizing it was never going to be attainable.
Yeah, for
The
sure.
bar wasn't even there. Like,
the goalpost always moves anyway.
The goalpost moved, and I didn't understand that. And so it wasn't through my own executive coaching and my own therapy work, which I'm saying therapy and coaching is not something you have to do with a problem. It's a great way. I have clients that I work with, just even from keeping them motivated in their space and growing. So these aren't things because you have a problem that you should consider therapy or coaching or wherever you get your motivational from. And that could even be religion or yoga, who knows? But for me, the unapologetic now is such a strong word for me, because I'm very unapologetic about this podcast. I'm very unapologetic about the work that I'm doing. And it really has resonated, and it's been a little overwhelming for me in a way, because my business before was very referral based, or someone, saw my website or something. And I'm really out in the world, not only on LinkedIn, but other social media sites. And then of course this platform. And in building my business, there were a lot of people that, had their opinions, if you will. And
they've never built a business.
Yeah. And I would like to give a shout out to Stacy Tank, who I just had on the podcast. And, she said that in her career, and a very successful one at that, said that she herself was given more bad advice than good advice.
For sure.
Yeah. And that really resonated with me. And so I'm very unapologetic on how I'm doing things. And it's not that I don't take in feedback or advice or anything like that, but I'm very unapologetic with what I'm doing. And it's become such a powerful word for me.
Yeah, because, I think a lot of times people are putting their fears on you.
Yes.
Yeah. And they don't realize that's what they're doing. They feel fear, and then they feel the need to stop you from doing something that might cause you harm. And it's coming from a place of love, but it's a distortion, right? It's not actually love, right? To put our fear on someone else, right? Because I already have enough fear. I have enough fear for like 7
I do for myself. Thank you.
Like it's courage it takes to not have full-time employment and a paycheck every 2 weeks anymore. Instead, be like only getting whatever money you can bring in yourself directly. Do you know what that's like? And I've been doing it now for 6 years. Right. Like that's a lot. Right. And it's tumultuous, and it's up and down, and it's, there's not a lot of stability in it. So there's plenty of fear to go around. Right. But like you do have to be unapologetic in order to succeed building your business. So I love that. I think that's great.
Yeah, thank you. I definitely appreciate the question. Shana, thank you so much again for your time today.
Thank you.
Thanks for streaming the Unconversations podcast. Felt the Unword effect? subscribe, share, and step into the movement that's flipping the script. Catch the next episode where we unmute the truth and uncover the unexpected.